is an interesting podcast today. We've had a fun conversation.
Fun, interesting, awkward.
Yeah, but
we weren't awkward with one another.
No.
But we've had awkward conversations at home lately.
Yeah.
Training up children.
So our conversation today is about having awkward conversations or uncomfortable conversations.
Sure. Should we give a little teaser?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the awkward conversations they can get ready for?
Well, we mentioned sex and being naked, but fair warning, if you have kids in the car or wherever you're listening, you might get some questions.
And they'll be good for you. It'll be good for you.
Yeah.
Heather thinks this is G-rated content. I think it's PG-rated content, but I'm
also way more liberal than your average mom, so.
But we're growing up together as we raise our kids and try to speak the truth in all seasons regarding all topics. So take a listen. So our little girls are of the age that they need to have sex talk. Their parents, whoever their parents are, which is us, need to talk to them about the birds and the bees.
Get the facts.
Get all the facts out. So Eleanor and B are at summer camp this week, so they're out of town. So I said to Cooper, my 18-year-old, hey, I'm going to be talking to Eleanor about sex. And is there anything that I didn't tell you that you need to know? Because I'd be happy to tell you anything. And he's like, I don't think so. And I was just like, well, just so you know, Dad and I are an open book. And if you want to ask us any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And he's like, oh my gosh. So he went over real quickly some anatomical, is that the word? Mm-hmm. Some facts about what actually happened. And I was like, okay, all right, never mind, bud. But I don't think he knows everything. I should probably help.
There was a family that I knew growing up, and their oldest boy was super smart. Like, he was a computer geek before computers were even invented. Like,
because computers have been around our whole lives.
Well, you know what I mean. Computers were like this weird thing in a big room.
That's true.
Gigantic machines.
That's true, because we had typewriters.
He knew about computers before the average person did.
Okay, good.
So he's like this super smart kid, and one day his mom walks into his room, and he's doing something, and she goes, Danny, I think I need to tell you about sex. And he's like, it's all right, Mom, I already know. And she's like, well, what do you know?
Oh, no.
And he lays it out for her, tells her everything. And she's like, where did you learn this? And he said, I started with the dictionary and worked my way through encyclopedias. And
wow.
So, but yeah, I've got Zuzu at home pretty much alone this week because my 3 older kids work all the time and B is away at camp. So I'm like, okay, this is a week for Zuzu and I to really dive into this topic.
Yeah.
And because usually when she gets something on her mind, she asks questions.
Sure.
She just wants to dive in really
Has
deep.
she had questions about this?
Kind of.
Are you tossing the question? Are you sowing the seeds of questions into her brain?
I am presenting the topics. So having 3 older siblings, I thought I hadn't had a straight out facts of life talk with her. We've had different talks about puberty and things come up that we're talking about.
She's a girl, so of course you've talked about bras and bodies changing and having something in your backpack in case you need it and all those things.
All those things. And having older siblings, she's exposed to different things that surely she's got some bits and pieces, but she hasn't had the full beginning to end story. So we're gonna talk about that this week. And
you already have, or we
are in the process of talking about it. I got a really great book. Somebody gave it to me, and it's a question and answer. So you follow through the book where it's the child will ask a question and then the parent reads the answer.
You mentioned that to me, and I started looking up some resources for Eleanor, and I think I may have bought the same one accidentally.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So
we'll drop it in the show notes.
I have really loved the book. Like it lays it all out there. Like there's no hiding or pretending, or that this is all nice and fuzzy. And but it gives detailed descriptions of everything that's going on. And
What do you mean by that? In the act of sex, everything that's going on, or everything that's going on as your body's changing? Or
everything,
what
everything of the act of sex, everything with bodies changing, even boys and girls. Like you talk about what's happening with the boys, and there was a picture, and she sat and read the chapter with me like this, so she didn't have to see what was on the page.
Right.
And then, it talked about frequency of how often.
Okay, I think we have the same book. It talks about. Well, is this a family-friendly podcast?
This is a very family-friendly.
Depends how old the people listening are. There's a whole little segment about boys and wet dreams and why that happens physiologically. And
that was the chapter with the pictures. So we read through all of that. And she was with a couple of friends. We went to the water park, and she came up to me and she's like, "Mom, is it all right if I talk to my friends about this book that we're reading?"
What'd you say?
And I said, "What are you going to tell them?" She said, "Well, I'm not going to tell them about what happens. I just want to tell them about how I'm feeling about reading the book."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine."
Yeah.
And so I texted the moms, and I was like, "Just so you know, this is what Suzu and I've been reading and talking about."
Sure.
And both the moms were like, "Oh my goodness, this is something I need to talk about. So what are you reading?" And anyway, but it is hilarious just to read this with her. She told me last night, she's like, "I really don't mind reading this book because it's good to have this information."
She's not wrong. She's not wrong.
So
goodness.
It is awkward. Like I start reading through the pages. It's talking about, okay, so Mom and Dad, you said, and I've been having Whit read some of the chapters with her, just so like this is a whole conversation. And she said, "So sex isn't just for making babies.
Right.
So how do you have sex, or why don't you have a baby every time you have sex?" And you have to read through it, and then it's like, "And how often do you and Dad have sex?" is one of the questions.
I liked the answer from the book is, that's a great question. But some of that is private between, your dad and I, because we're married.
Yeah.
So that's not something I'm specifically going to answer, but what a great question.
Yeah.
Like, none of your business.
Yeah. But it's just like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a Christian-based book. I loved the introduction of the book where the author is saying, like, we are not so presumptuous to think that we've gotten everything right.
Yeah.
And you may have different opinions on some of this. And we hope this serves as a guide to get you moving, having conversations with your child. And if you don't agree with every single thing we said, that's okay. Yeah. And I think that's sometimes why we don't talk to our kids about certain things is we don't all view things the same. Even Christians, we don't all view everything the same scripturally, or we just avoid conversations that could have some level of disagreement or tension. And why avoid them?
I feel like I avoid the conversations, especially sex conversations, because I'm going to spoil my kids' innocence.
Yeah.
Because this book, we haven't gotten into these chapters yet, but it's going to cover porn, sexual abuse, abortion, people who sleep together, what happens when you're sleeping together without being married. Because the way that this continually points kids to keeping God as the focus of their sexual feelings as they develop, is really beautiful. But then it's like, okay, so I'm having these feelings. What happens if I have sex before I get married and everything? So I'm, it's like, I don't really want to talk about abortion with my daughter to know that people do that and everything. And that's something that's in our world. But it's something that she really needs to know about, and I would rather be the one to talk about it than not.
Absolutely. Eleanor's at camp, so right now I'm just like, these are such easy conversations because she's not here and I'm not having them. So let's be honest about that. But I just think, especially with our daughters in particular being the youngest in their families and having much older siblings, like B and Eleanor and I were joking about this just last week. They have kids in their class because their classmates or oldest siblings that are like watching shows that honestly now I've never even heard of because we're so far beyond
they're
that.
baby shows.
Bluey and I can't even remember.
I don't even know.
I can't even remember what shows the girls were saying. I was like, I've never heard of that. Where our girls are watching more preteen, early teen shows because it's just at the lowest end of entertainment value where the older kids won't be like, turn the television off. I can't stand that song anymore. They can still get away with it. So, you think about what they're seeing. They're seeing relationships play out in front of them without even realizing that they're seeing it.
Yeah.
So we better talk to them.
When I was preteen, I read the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
By Judy Blume.
Yeah. And it really resonated with me. It was written in the 1970s, but as I'm reading it, I felt like, am I supposed to be reading this? Should I be reading this? Because it's talking about all these topics of periods and boys and bras and things that seemed taboo.
Sure.
That I would ask my mom questions and she would just ignore me. Like, I didn't hear that. I don't know what you're talking about. And
I would never have dared to ask my mom any questions.
Well, you're left on your own to figure it out on your own, to figure, what is a period or what is French kissing or whatever. You've got to figure that out on your own.
You got to teach yourself how to do all those things. I remember I started my period on like a Friday evening and I had friends getting ready to come over for a sleepover. And I remember because we didn't talk about oh my goodness, I'm going to tell you, the whole world doesn't need to know this, but it's a little bit funny. No one in my family talked about anything like this. So I started my period. I was horrified because what was I going to do? Because these friends were coming over and how am I going to take care of myself? And then later on, as I progressed, I think I probably told my mom I'd started my period that I would need some pads or whatever. And I remember telling all my friends that I had to use pads because I was allergic to tampons. And they're like, really? Well, come to find out, no one had trained me how to properly use one. And so it was not working out for me. And I thought my body was rejecting it. But that was the extent, like in the 70s of us growing up, Judy Blume.
We were 80s.
Judy Blume's book written in the 70s, why we could still read it in the 80s and it resonate with us. Because it's like she was talking about things that it's like, nobody talks about this, Judy.
Yeah. So it was, I gave that to Zuzu a year.
Book?
Yeah, I gave it to her a year ago. And she was just like, I couldn't get into it. I didn't understand what they were talking about.
Isn't it you, though, that told me recently that any book that's written like more than 10 years ago is considered historical fiction because the references are so out of touch with what kids really are living right now?
Yeah.
We talked about this. Eleanor's read a book from the Babysitters Club, the original ones, and she's like, I can't understand why all these girls get together in a room 2 hours every Thursday to wait for people to call them to book them as babysitters. Like, that's the weirdest thing because there was landlines and no cell phones, and that's the only way it would work.
You'd have to either write a letter, ask somebody to babysit for you, or
write a letter. Yeah. But anyway, back to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Yeah. They just had a movie version of it came out in the spring, maybe April. It must not have been a blockbuster because I never heard about it hitting the movie theaters, but both of us have watched it this week.
Yeah, we watched it with Whit and I. And actually, Whit got a phone call and he was like, oh, no, I don't want to take this call because he's really enjoying the movie. It was funny. And I was so glad that, Zuzu and I have been having all these talks, and everything that we've been talking about has come up in the movie, including the pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Was in the movie. And so, as we're watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, what do you think about that girl? Or what do you think about when this happened? And they all were grabbing the anatomy book and looking at the pictures and things like that. And it was just refreshing to talk about it and her to have the full knowledge
and truth behind it. Because what's fascinating in the movie, and it's in the book as well, is at one point they're taught, the girls the main character, Margaret, and her friends I can't remember what they're talking about, but they want to know what it would look like to have a fully female developed body. And Margaret says, well, my dad has these magazines.
Yeah.
And they're like, go get one. So if today's girls wonder what would it look like to have a fully developed female body, they're looking at porn. They're looking at images on their phone, and they're looking at altered images, just like the magazines. I mean, people don't really look like that, but they're looking for, what do I wish I looked like? And they're striving for something that's unattainable and not real. They're still looking. It's not so different from when we were kids. It's just you're not running to some male person in your family or neighbor or whatever and reaching under the bed and grabbing the magazine and showing it to your friends. You're scrolling.
Right. Well, even if you're not looking at porn, side note, Judy Blume said that her books resonated with people because she felt like adults did not tell the truth, or they withheld information from their kids or young people in their life.
And don't we do that because we're nervous?
We're nervous. So she was the one that was willing to, from the perspective of a child, talk about everything so that it would be normal and acceptable and give you a, like, you're just fine. You know, when you're worried about your body developing on time and you're 12 years old and you haven't started your period yet, that it's okay if you don't start your period until you're 15 or whatever, or boobs come in all sizes and things. That Judy was willing to have these conversations.
We should invite Judy on the show.
We should.
We'd
She's
like her.
willing to have these conversations through her books that resonated with people because they were like, she's telling me the truth. And now people don't read as much as they should. They're looking at social media, but they're looking at social media and they're like, these people are telling me the truth.
Oh, for sure.
They're, on Instagram, this is what I should look like, this, but it's still a lie.
Right. One thing I thought that was interesting, there's a documentary on Amazon Prime right now, a Judy Blume documentary, and she says that kids from all over the country were writing her letters and then admitting, or not admitting necessarily, telling their story. Like, this is what's happening at my house. Stories of abuse, stories of their own sexuality and things like this, because she was a safe place because she was willing to tell the truth. And as I've started conversations, we don't have to talk about sex this whole podcast, but as I've started conversations with Eleanor, she has told me that, like, I don't really like to hear about this. It makes me uncomfortable. And I said, I get that. The problem is you're going to hear about it, and I just want you to know I will always tell you the truth. You can ask me hard questions, and we might both be embarrassed, but I will tell you the truth. And so Eleanor's biggest, her body hasn't started changing. So she still says when she grows up that she wants to be a single mom that works at a doggy daycare because she likes animals and she does like kids, but she does not want a man in her life. And I'm like, oh, sister, I mean, like, you could do that, but it's really hard to raise kids. You might like somebody to do it with you.
To help you out.
You might need somebody to help make some money and help support you and discipline the children and all. But she is not attracted to anyone yet. Sure, I have a little crush on so-and-so. He's so cute, but there's no sexual tension. But so her biggest concerns right now with where sex lies is that she cannot believe that animals also do this. She's an animal lover. And so, like, forget it about the adults because I'm not an adult and that's weird and that's for another day. We'll talk about that later, but have our dogs have sex? Like, oh my gosh, I don't know. We have a boy dog and a girl dog. She's very concerned. Very concerned.
When we were talking about the facts of sex, of eggs and sperm and things like that, and how females have all the eggs they need in their body for their whole lifetime. And I said, well, this is the same as chickens.
Oh my word.
I brought in, this is how it works with chickens. You've got to have the rooster to fertilize the eggs. And so she's like, okay, that makes sense.
Oh, okay, that's actually easier to comprehend than thinking about anybody I know in my life. Yeah. I want to be a parent, a church leader, a whatever, that's willing to have difficult conversations.
Willing to tell the truth.
That's willing to tell the truth. That's willing to tell the truth.
When you tell the truth, you are a safe place. Even if that is painful truth, awkward truth, whatever it might be, you are willing to be a safe place.
You know, a couple of weeks ago, Brian and I had this, I wouldn't even say disagreement. Like, we were both mad at each other at the same time. I don't remember. We were cooking, we were making a meal, and he was in my space and I was in his space, and we were just being short. How about I'll say this? I was being short with him. But I don't even know if he was being short with me. I don't remember. I told him this last night. I don't remember. But what I do remember, and the question I have for myself as far as being someone that's willing to tell the truth, and we talked about this a week or so ago, about speaking the truth the way that the person you're talking to can receive it and hear it. So something happened in the kitchen, obviously, because we were both mad at each other. And Brian is very, very quick to apologize, and he was not apologizing. And so in my mind, I was just thinking, well, I must have done something wrong, because I often wait for him to apologize because he's a very good apologizer. And I'm usually not sorry. So I was waiting for him to apologize, and he did not. And so even the next day, I was waiting for him to apologize. And I felt like the Lord, do you ever feel like this? Like, it's not like the Lord is speaking to you, but you have a thought in like a split second that to explain the thought, it would take a couple of minutes. So it's like, it must be the Lord, because I couldn't have conjured that up so quickly.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready, and I had this quick thought that, like, if I was standing somewhere, I don't know why this is the thought, but if I was standing somewhere, like let's say I was in line at Target and I stepped backwards and accidentally stepped on someone. I didn't know they were there. I didn't mean to. I never intended to hurt them, but I stepped on. I would quickly be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And so I felt like the Lord was saying to me, why wouldn't you do that to Brian? I was like, well, because I didn't do anything wrong. Like, because I can't think of anything I did. And I want to tell the truth. I want to be a safe place to always tell the truth. So I wrestled with the Lord for several more hours because I didn't want to lie and say I was sorry if I wasn't. And then on the other side, I have this thought that, like, if I accidentally stepped on someone I do not know and I didn't mean to, I would apologize to them and I have zero relationship with them. So why can't I tell them I'm sorry? But I had to wait until I knew I could just apologize and not also say, but I didn't mean to do anything. I don't even know what I did. Like, I didn't do anything intentionally, so you should have given me more grace because I wasn't trying to be mean. So it took a while. And then finally I was like, hey, yesterday in the kitchen, I'm really sorry. And he said, thank you. And all the tension left, and we didn't further discuss it, and we moved on. And so then a week later, I was like, hey, can we go back to that one I'm sorry? Like, that was really hard for me. He's like, why? And I said, because I still don't feel like I did anything wrong, but I must have. And he's like, yeah, it was good that you apologized. I appreciate it.
Oh, Brian.
So, but I think being a person that my kids will come to and trust me means I'm going to have to be a person that also apologizes, not just tells them about sex,
right?
But apologizes when I don't think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's such a weird feeling.
I'm sure there's a Bible verse about that.
I hope there is.
If I had enough time to think about it or to text Whit, I would find out.
Text Whit. Oh my gosh, it's like we're on a game show.
He's my go-to
Call
concordance. Yeah.
There has to be.
There's ones about humbling yourself.
I think it's a humility issue for me. I think it's a humility issue. It's a big deal. Why is it the most difficult? Maybe it's just for me. Maybe you don't feel this way. Why is it the most difficult to walk in humility with my spouse? I even feel like it's easier to walk in humility with my kids. Certainly with a friend. Why with Brian? Like, why would I just be like, well, I don't know if I can apologize to you?
I know the answer to this.
Oh, good. A scripture or just an answer?
Just the answer.
Okay, good.
Because your spousal relationship is your most intimate relationship.
Sure.
I mean, they've seen you naked.
Sure.
But
only when you're trying to make a baby, according to that book.
Only when you're making babies. when you are apologizing and humbling yourself, you are presenting yourself naked in a different way than just without your clothes on. And it's really hard to be that vulnerable with someone that has the potential power to hurt you.
Yeah.
To shame
in ways that
you
no one else could.
In ways that no one else could. Which in a trusting, loving, giving relationship, you should be able to present yourself naked to them. And this is a podcast about sex, so we'll say that a lot.
Naked a lot?
You should be able to present yourself naked to them. And
is this the appropriate place to tell that story about that pastor's retreat you went to without naming any names, but one of the challenges?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it seems like we're talking about these things.
Which this is science.
Okay,
so
science.
It's not
we're
even
going to talk about science.
It's not even just a Christian pastor's philosophy on this, but they recommend that you do skin to skin probably every day, which is...
It seems like a lot.
It seems like a lot, but they recommend that being naked with someone and
with your spouse.
My God. With your spouse.
And so many thoughts went through my head really quickly. I'm like, oh, no, that's not what we meant.
Scientifically, having skin-to-skin contact with your spouse.
And when you say skin-to-skin, you're not necessarily saying sex.
I'm not saying sex at all.
Just
skin-to-skin contact, which is the same for babies. When you have a baby.
Right, it's why in the hospital they're just like,
put that baby on your chest for skin-to-skin. But it reduces or increases your serotonin levels. It does.
Oh my gosh, I'm on a whole antidepressant because of serotonin levels.
So you
could need more skin to skin.
You could reduce, and Brian would gladly volunteer for.
Yeah, I need this for my mental health.
Yeah, but having that skin to skin contact, that naked vulnerability with someone that you can be 100% yourself with in your body, in your emotions, in your mind, in your thought. I mean,
so what was the challenge that was presented to the people there? It was like every day or today when you leave, 5 minutes of
skin-to-skin contact, which, I'm not necessarily practicing this, but what if in your marriage you did skin-to-skin contact 3 times a week and you just shared your burdens of the day and maybe even prayed for each other in this...
While you're naked?
While you're naked.
Okay, that's what I thought.
In this vulnerable... What would happen in your body, your mind, your spirit,
less divorce.
Your marriage? Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your homework for the week.
Oh my gosh.
Forget about laughing. Time to get naked.
We're done laughing and now it's time to get naked. Oh my goodness. Brian sent me this. Brian is such an intentional person, which is so good for me because I just fly by the seat of my pants in life and I'm unproductive most of the time. So anyway, I don't mind. That's how I live. But he sent me this text the other day and said, hey, I'm interested in discussing these questions on our next date night. And then I go to this list or whatever, and it's like intentionality in marriage. And so then for a quick second, I feel insecure, like, oh, great, he's unhappy in his marriage. And now we have to sit down and talk about these questions. Like, I'm always the disappointment. And then I read and it didn't feel that way at all. It was just an effort to so it's like, I don't know, there was like 10 things that you should talk about on a regular basis with your spouse. So maybe we should do it while we're naked. But, one of them is like, is there any way that I've disappointed you in the last week? Is there anything I could do in the next week to lift a burden for you? Is there any way that I could help out that would help you? And anyway, as I've read the questions, I thought I'm happy to talk about those things. Let's do it. But then, of course, I'll have to ask him as well, and then I'm going to end up doing
get
work.
Your report card.
I'm supposed to be reading a paper for his master's that he needs to submit this weekend, and I told him I am going to have it done by such and such day, and that day has come and gone, and I just forgot.
No. Well, you're going to have to do that when you get home.
I'm going to have to do it right after this podcast. But I think with Brian and I, one of the things that I learned in that apology to him was we didn't have to have a big drawn out argument or fight or negotiation or arm wrestle over who did what and what caused him to get his feelings hurt and what caused me to sense frustration. It was as simple as had I stepped back on someone and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry." Those words built a bridge between us and the tension immediately went away. I think sometimes I don't want to walk in humility or own my mistakes because I don't want it to turn into this big lecture and let's talk about all the ways that I suck as a person and I'm a terrible person. I feel like God showed me it's not always as difficult as I am portraying it.
Like you make it out to
yes,
be.
like I seriously, I waited until I could sincerely say, and in all honesty, I wasn't positive what I did, but I do know his feelings got hurt. Mm-hmm. And I just sincerely said, about last night cooking dinner, I'm really sorry. And he said, thank you. And all the tension between us lifted. Now, certainly there's going to be other times where it's going to require an in-depth conversation, but that one really good interaction makes me less afraid of the next time I have to apologize.
Yeah.
So what a huge win.
Yeah.
Because the next time it might need to come with a longer, drawn-out conversation and more specific details. I just know I somehow stepped on his toes. Mm-hmm.
And he never said, no. Even when you went back to the conversation, he never said.
He just said, thank you.
And he never... So you don't know.
So he had probably let it go. He'd probably let it go.
How do you know then you're not going to do it again?
I'm going to do it again because, since we're talking about sex, I think it was PMS. Oh. I started my period 2 days later.
So just text him and say, Mark,
steer clear
for the next 3 days.
Because I do go around this. And I'm a little bit fearful of menopause for this exact reason. I don't want any more hormone changes in my body. But I used to think PMS is just like a cop out for women to like just be moody and just blame it on something. But I seriously, I will have times in my life where I'm just like, everyone in my whole family is so stupid. Like no one picks up their crap. No one knows how to speak to me in the right tone. Everyone is an idiot. And then 2 days later, I'll start my period and I'll be like, oh, it may have been me. So I even think I was probably being short. Honestly, by time I apologized, I had started my period. And then I go, I still don't know what I did wrong, but I'm 110% sure it was tone or short fuse or I just think even though I can't personally identify, I've got to be a big enough person that knows that I do act differently at different times in my life, and I need to be on the alert.
Mm-hmm. I have to be on guard when pre-cycle, pre-menstruation.
Yeah. PMS.
PMS. Because
I leaned into the microphone on that one. Yeah, it's fun to say.
Because I don't think I'm on my guard enough. Because then my thoughts just they get out of control, and you're like, I'm unhappy with everything. And
oh yeah, it's everybody in my house is stupid is how I would word it.
Yeah. And then I'm like, I'm just like, this isn't fun. And then I realize, wait, what's happening in your thoughts? Because I'm an internal, you do everything externally. I do everything internally. And then my thoughts spiral and go dark and.
Right. Which neither one is good, but you're right. I do it externally. So it comes out as a sigh, as an eye roll, as comments, and in some
loud talking.
Loud talking. It can be very loud. Some people call it yelling. I just call it loud talking. Sometimes I'm just excited. But yeah.
Well, this has been fun today. I have really enjoyed my week with Zoo and talking about all this.
I thought you were going to say, I've really enjoyed talking to you about things. I'm like, wow.
I've enjoyed talking to you, but it's been a fun week talking to Zuzu and just like getting it all out there.
Sure.
It's like everything's on the table. Now we can keep talking about it and it's not weird.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation with you and the fact that I can apologize to my husband and not be fearful that it's going to turn into a longer conversation. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, and the apology is always worth it.
Absolutely.
So we hope you guys have had a good time and maybe God has stirred some things in your heart of areas that you need to have awkward, difficult, challenging conversations. Come along on the journey with us. And we'll see you next week on Life in Motion.